The following is a KPB Media Works production.
Choose your fighter.
How's it going, guys? This is Rodimus Prime back again with another episode of KPBCast. Just want to remind you guys that if you're not watching live on YouTube or on Twitch, you can catch us on one of our streams over at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. So if you're ever driving or just want to have something in the background to listen to, those are places to go to catch KPBCast. And now, without further ado, I want to introduce to you one of the FGC's most prolific content creators and discoverers of tech. He's been around for quite a while playing Street Fighter. Hailing from Queens, New York, I want to introduce you guys to Javits Arias. How's it going, man? How's everything going on today?
Hey, I'm all good, man. Thanks for having me on your show. And I'm happy to be able to share, a little bit about my background and what I do, and just tell you my story.
Awesome. So I just want to go right into it. What brought you into gaming? Because of course, I feel like most fighting game players start out as gamers. So what brought you into gaming? When did you start discovering video games, and what brought you to?
Yeah, well,
what started you on this road?
Yeah. So I was born in the 80s. I was born in 1986. First console was Atari, and then I had a Nintendo NES. And like many people that we know that my first game was just straight up Super Mario Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So Mario Brothers, and that's like the first game I ever experienced. The one that came together with Duck Hunt and all that, and just used to play with my brother, and I kind of just grew up like that. And I didn't encounter Street Fighter until it came out for Super Nintendo in the early '90s, and I was living in Dominican Republic at the time, and one of our neighbors had it, and the first time I saw it, I was like blown away. I was like, wow, this is like, I never seen anything like this. Like two guys fighting side by side, and nobody knew how to do any special moves or anything like that. It was like you were just people just mashing, and things would happen, and every day it was just like that part of the journey of discovery. Like, oh, if you do this a certain way, you start figuring out moves and what does what. Weren't any good back then, but that's kind of was my introduction into Street Fighter. And just as a gamer, I used to be really into just whatever was out for Super Nintendo, like Super Mario World, Mega Man X, Demon's Crest, those kind of games. So I kind of grew up in in the Super Nintendo era, going into the PlayStation era. And as far as just kind of how I got exposed to the FGC and like the broader fighting game culture, when I moved back to New York, arcades were really big in the '90s. And all right, 1 second, all right? I just got a little nephew over there making some noise.
No
Hold
problem.
on 1 second. Jake.
It happens, guys. It happens all our podcasts. You're probably gonna edit this apart, all right? I'm guessing. Yeah, we can talk about sponsors. We can talk about Technique Support and our discount code KPB, which saves you 10% off all of their chairs, stuff like that. We want to announce our partnership with Saltamia. She's great. She makes awesome designs for the fighting community. Very cutesy keychain, just little decals, pillows. To check out at saltamia.art. Yes, I don't get that wrong. And also, KPB will get you 10% off any gear over at acquire.ca. This is our apparel maker. They make fine apparel for different FCC and just esports teams. So check them out at acquire.ca, based in Canada. And now we got Javits back after brief hiatus. Everything's good. All right.
Yeah. So just like the way I got exposed into arcades was in the '90s, pretty much any laundromat or like your local chicken store or your local bodega, your convenience store or whatever, would always have your basic Street Fighter 2, Super Turbo, one of those things. And I used to, whenever I would ever, go with my parents to the laundromat, they would throw me a little bit of change so I could play on one of those machines. And that's when I started seeing like, oh, that there was like different levels of players where like some players were really good, some players were not so good. And, I started to see like the whole flow of like, the good players would stay on, and they had to like kind of have a rotating line and all that. So I kind of
You
got
had the
exposed. I
quarters
was a little
across like
kid.
the machine and stuff like that. The quarters like lined up on the
Yeah,
machines.
lining them up, and it was kind of a rowdy crowd because back then, since fighting games were so new, still like people like every establishment that you went to kind of had like their own like rules as to like what you could and couldn't do. Like in Street Fighter, some people wouldn't like it if you threw them too much or if you threw too many
Hmm.
fireballs or little things like that. So,
Yeah.
and there was like there was a mix of like kids and adults playing together, which is also kind of like a strange dynamic. And there was
It
like
is. It
bullying
is.
sometimes. So there was all
Hmm.
types of like the Wild
Yeah.
West. Like it was just crazy. And so I kind of got exposed to that. And then over time, I kind of used to just follow my older brother. He's 2 years older than me, so he was able to go check out different places that had like some of the better arcades, like if they had like Marvel superheroes or X Men versus Street Fighter, and I'll tag along. And then over time, you started seeing some of the same players around the local neighborhood that like are winning in this arcade and then winning in that arcade. And then one of them told my brother about Chinatown Fair, and that was in
Hmm.
the Chinatown Fair was like the arcade in the city with like all the best
The
players.
arcade. They say
Yeah, it
that
was like
the arcade.
the arcade of that era with all the best players. And if you thought you were good in your arcade, you had to go test yourself over there.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's kind of like how I went and got exposed to Chinatown Fair. And the first time I went was when right around the time that CVS Capcom vs SNK 1 came out. So like
Okay.
right before like 99 2000 around there. And yeah, it was like such a wild thing for me because I was still very young. I was born 86, so I was about 13. Um and I think I told my parents I was going to my friend's house or something, and then me and my brother just like sneaked all the way to Chinatown just to play a couple of games for like 2 hours. We'd come try to be home by 8 or something. So it was a fun time, but I got to see uh, some of where the really good players were, and then I actually after that little stint, I actually got into first person shooters through high school. So I
Okay.
used to actually compete in Counter Strike in the early days of Counter Strike, which is like one of the bigger
Oh.
esports
Okay.
now. Yeah, so I was on a team in high school and all that. We used to play in like what was back then was called the Cyber Athletic Amateur League, which was like the amateur online version of CPL. CPL was a
Okay.
Cyber Athletic Professional League, which used to have like offline LAN events for like Quake and Counter Strike and all those big FPS games of those times. And that kind of exposed me to the esports side of things. And then right around the same time, I also started learning about like just competitive gaming in general, and I got exposed to like Shoryuken.com, and then from seeing Shoryuken.com and like kind of just following the updates from that site. I think there was another site called Fighters Cafe back then as well, and I started seeing like tournament results out in like West Coast, and that's how I learned about like Alex Faye and John Choi and like
Hmm.
Combo Fiends and all those guys. And I used to like find videos about them, and I used to literally like go to the library and print out FAQs from James Chen, just like how to do combos. Like I started like that was kind of like my first exposure to like what they now call tech, like
Yeah.
breaking down the game and like knowing like how the deeper systems work, why certain things work the way that they do. So that was like my first exposure to that. And I always found that stuff really interesting because I felt like that's the way that, in my mind that some of these players were elevating their game. Um, but the reality of it was that a lot of these players back then, they just played a lot, man. They just played and they figured things out. And then they kind of had like some of the guys who also played, but like were kind of a little bit more behind the scenes, like the Jav1ts, that maybe they weren't the
Mhm.
strongest competitors, but they were like the ones that were kind of like figuring stuff out and kind of like, you know, expanding the level of the game in a different plane, a different field. So it was always interesting for me to see that side of it. But then through college, I went to
Well,
City Tech in
before
Brooklyn.
you get into college, because you've covered a good foundation of how you started in the community. I want to
Yeah.
get more information about Javis, the person behind that. Like when you're not playing fighting games, like what is Javis, the person like?
Oh, so yeah. So besides like my fighting game life, man, I and it really this what I'm going to talk about kind of relates to fighting games. I'm the type of person that I'm really intrigued by like different cultures of the world, and being able to meet different people from all over the place, and like I'm very interested in learning different languages and traveling and and stuff like that. And through the fighting game community, I've met so many lifelong friends from all different parts of the world. Like when um, one of the first times I went to Japan a few years ago, I actually stayed
Mhm.
with a friend that I met through the community, and I didn't have to like spend the hotel, or I had a
Wow,
local actually showing me around for like 2 weeks. Um,
that's nice.
so
Yes.
yeah, I'm into like traveling, and I used to be I used to be into salsa. That's how I met my girlfriend, who's now the mother of my daughter. So I used to be into salsa dancing. Um, yeah, a bunch of different things. These days, lately, I've gotten into. I made a career change recently, so now I'm into like coding and programming. Um,
Yes. I saw you got a new position recently, right?
yeah,
With
yeah.
somebody.
So
Yeah.
I finally. So I was working before. Before I got into coding, I was working as a account manager at an ad agency, and
Uh-huh.
I kind of felt like I reached a, what's the word I'm looking for, like the peak of my
Reached the
career in
summit.
that.
Yeah, you reached. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
hit
Like
the
I
top of
reached
the ladder.
something and it just I didn't feel like that career was fulfilling for me anymore. So I was like, you know what? Um, Being the way that I'm such a like a mathematical thinker, and I like to break things down, I said, maybe I should give coding a chance. And my brother, the same one. It's funny because a lot of things just relate back to my brother. He's the one that got me into the gaming, and he did a coding boot camp and ended up at Spotify. And then I
Okay.
saw the way that process went for him, and I thought, oh wow, even though I didn't go to college for computer science, I see that this is another avenue to get into this industry. And so I took that route, and I was able to do the same thing that he did. And I went to a coding boot camp, and then I finally landed a job offer last month. So yeah.
Nice, nice, interesting. So, when you definitely had you were inspired by people like James Ten to get into like the real nitty gritty of like how fighting games work, and
Yep.
and as a result of that, you've taken that passion and learned how to find out situations and provide that to today's players, who didn't have, back in the 90s, like you said, we didn't have the internet. It was just starting out in the mid 90s, and so
Yep.
we didn't have access to everything that we could figure out, and then like it had to go by word of mouth or people you knew in your neighborhood or wherever you were able to get access to players who actually knew things, right? So um, now today in this information technology world, and you have so many places where you can get information for anything, right? Why do you feel
Yep.
you stand out in the community, and why you've always stand out? Because I look at your Twitter feed, and you're always putting up something and you get so many hits. Um, why do you think that people come to you? Like, what is it about you in particular that you're one of the more favorite content creators?
So a couple of reasons. One of them being that I myself was a competitor, and it wasn't that long ago. Um, when Street Fighter 4 came out, and that was kind of like a resurgence of fighting game, particularly Street Fighter, because there was no new Street Fighter game. Uh, I wouldn't count Capcom Fighting Jam, so there really was no new Street Fighter game since like CVS 2.
Right.
So I don't want to say the scene was dead, but it was kind of like, it slowed down for a bit. And then when Street Fighter 4 came out, it was like, it was 3D, 2.5D. A lot of players from the West were playing again, mix of old school and new school. I was playing, it was out in arcades and like a select few arcades like Chinatown. I think Family Fun Arcade had it, and a couple of places in California had it. I think Texas had it. So it was like a very interesting time because like everybody was trying to like, yo, it's a new Street Fighter. Everybody wanted to be the best again, be the best region. So everybody was playing hard, practicing, and one of the ways to have that competitive edge was to constantly find ways to elevate your game. And actually, when in the early days of Street Fighter 4, when not that many people had access to the game, and the first tournament for that game, which was only played by the limited amount of people that had access to it, at least here in the States, was at an event in Virginia called Sensation. It was run by Perfect Sin. He had his own SF4 board, and Justin Wong was still living in New York at the time. He hadn't moved to the West Coast, and Gutex and Mike Ross and Combo Fiend came over to that tournament on the East Coast to play against the best players from the East, and lo and behold, they whooped our ass. Like, they were on another level. Gutex won that tournament, and they were doing stuff that we had never seen. So that kind of humbled us in a way that like but it also lit the little fuel under us, like lit a fire under us. Like, man, we can't. There's the new game is just coming out. Like, we can't let ourselves like just get whooped like this. And then and just like that, we started playing much harder. We started trying to figure out the systems, and that's kind of like how I started becoming like known as like the tech guy, because I played Balrog back then, and Justin, he played Rufus, but he also had like a pocket Balrog, and then so I kind of like used to find little things that I could be like, oh, this would be cool if you did this, or maybe you should try this, or like I would kind of try to recreate situations that I saw happening in tournaments, and by recreating them, I was finding solutions, and then the more solutions I was able to provide, the better I was able to support, not just become better for myself, but all my friends around me in my scene. I was the one that told them like, oh, you do this or do that, and it wasn't even a matter of like that I was better than them, but I just had certain answers to certain little things that they might not know about how the system worked.
Right.
And those it proved to be crucial in some key moments, because the next time that there was like a big run back, it was at final round 2009, I want to say, and I believe Justin was able to take that tournament. I don't remember the exact result. I won't lie, I don't remember the exact result, but I believe Justin was able to take it back and beat Gutex. So that's kind of like how I started. Just like, aside from being just a player, I also kind of like felt like a responsibility to like make sure that my scene was like also very good.
Right.
So yeah. And in terms of, to answer your question as to why I think people kind of gravitate to the stuff that I post, or like, I get a lot of like, retweets and shares and things like that, it's because of just the consistency with which I put out stuff and how fast. Like, for example, Street Fighter 5 was recently updated last week, and I've already put out a ton of videos. It's just because I have such an understanding of the system, and I have a process where I'm able to, even if a character that I've never used before, I'm able to know like, okay, what are the moves that are used for this, and how can I don't know, find their most optimal big combo punish in this situation, and then I'll show it,
Right.
and then I'll show like different variations of it. So I kind of have like already like a system in place that, and it's not even written down. It's like it's all in here, but I kind of like have a quick way of like, all right, this is like a check, like an internal checklist. Like, all right, I'm gonna check what their basic combos are, maybe figure out a way to optimize it, maybe figure out a way to like create a cool little mix up or something. So I have like these ways that um I kind of know what
Is it
people
like
want to see.
flowchart based? Like you just like I like how's your selection process? Like do you just say, oh, I haven't done something for Lucia in a while, or what is that? Is it like just who's the hottest right now? Is it something that you do it
Yeah,
where
yeah, it's
someone asks
actually
for
related.
requests?
Yeah, it's actually initially, if I, like, the first thing I'm gonna try is something that I seen that is like popular right now. Like for example, um, when the update was released and the patch notes, everybody's like, "Oh my God, Ryu got updated! Like he got buffed like crazy." So I'm like, "All right,
Yeah.
let me take this new Ryu for a spin and see what he got." And then I posted like a whole bunch of crazy stuff that he can do. Um, because I'm able to see the notes and understand what those changes mean, like how they translate to the actual
Mhm.
game, and I'm able to like, demonstrate that. And sometimes a lot of people, they may read like patch notes and they may not fully understand
They don't understand. Yeah.
what it means. Like what does it mean if they extended the hitbox of a certain attack, or what does it mean if they increase the damage? What are the repercussions in the actual game? So I'm able to like quickly show that, like make it tangible for them in a way. And then and the fact that I'm able to do it for so many different characters is why a lot of people, because I kind of like can help everybody out, and that's my goal. So I'm like I'm succeeding in that regard. That um, I'll say I don't do every character, but I would say a good 85% of the cast, which is like
Yeah. You do a lot,
uh,
and I'm sure anyone
yeah,
that's in high demand gets covered by you on a regular basis. Um,
yeah,
I want to say like so, and don't take this the wrong way because I definitely understand where this comes from. Some people say where like those that can't do teach. Has anyone ever told you that because maybe like you wasn't very successful maybe as a competitive player or not to where you wanted to be? Do you take resentment to that statement in any way if someone were to say that to you?
yeah. No, I wouldn't take offense to it. I would just say that being a competitor, there certainly anybody that plays a fighting game specifically is it's a competitive by nature. So of course everybody that plays wants to win and wants to be good.
Hmm.
Um, but as you grow older and just life has different circumstances. Like sometimes you have to prioritize different things. Like
Hmm.
like I may have, let's say, a certain level of talent, but if I'm not like actively playing consistently and entering events all the time, I'm not going to get those results.
Right.
So,
You have
but
to
I
constantly
just
sharpen your sword.
right. If I'm not constantly
Yeah.
sharpening my sword, I'm not gonna be the one, in your top eights of your NLBCs every week, or But I feel like what can I contribute if I'm not competing because of whatever life circumstances I have going on? Like now I'm a father. I was working on a career change. I've always had a full time job, and I'm not using those as excuses, but I'm using
Of
that
course not.
just
No.
as like different things that I prioritize in my life aside from just competing. Um,
Mhm.
but I still feel like what do I have to offer to my community? And I have a wealth of knowledge that I'm willing and happy to share. So I figure if I'm not going to compete, I might as well share what's in my head and help others that are competing elevate their game. So yeah, like yeah, to answer your question, I don't really take offense. I think there is some truth to that maybe if you can't do teach, but to be able to teach you, I think you must be able to do to a certain degree. So I think like, if there's any
Right.
doubt that like I don't know how to play, anybody could just always ask me to play, and I'm happy to play anybody. So it's like
Right.
I'll still throw down, man. I'm still in there. Like
Yeah.
I
So
still
like, listen,
whenever the opportunity arises, I'm in
you
there to play.
I'm sure you're better than the average player. Yeah, still, like than the casual Street Fighter player because I talk about this with I had Gilbert on the show, Punisher from the Marvel community,
Yeah,
and we talked about
great guy.
yeah, definitely awesome, sweet gentleman, like great guy. We talked about how as someone who's in the community, you know, when someone that's not in the community approaches you and say, "Oh, I hear you play Street Fighter. I'm kind of nice. You want to play?" And you're like, "Whatever." You entertain it, whatever, and then like you pick up the sticks and like you can tell literally within the first 5 seconds, like how much this person knows. Like, is that something
Yeah,
you have a knack for? Because I know I play someone like I work in high school, and like we've had like kids come in and like they play fighting games, and we had a lot of kids that play Smash, and I casually play Smash. I'm not good. I'm not great at it, but I can
right,
beat people. And
right.
they're like, you can't play, Mr. Reed and what else. And I'm like, let me see, and meanwhile, I know these guys don't know anything, and then I'm like just destroying like 7v1, because they're all playing eight controllers. Like
Right, right, right.
how did you win? So like, do you get that very often? Like, and I know you got people maybe for your different work places where you work, so they probably hear about what you do, and they probably go, I could beat you. You're not that good. You ever get any of that stuff?
Yeah, a little bit of that. It has happened before, like, kind of when I encounter like people who are a little bit more on the casual side, and then they'll be like, "Oh, I'm good with, I used to play Street Fighter 2," and then they'll hit me with some old line like that. And I'm like, "Hey, man, it's been a long time since then." You know,
Yo, I'm nice with Ken,
Little
son. Like
things,
that's
yeah,
always the hood statement. And
exactly.
like, is Ken? You think is Ken the hood favorite? Has always been the hood favorite.
He
You think?
definitely will always be the hood favorite. Ken is
Yeah.
the hood character, man.
Ken is
Yeah,
like, I don't
Ken
know. It's
will
something about
always.
Ken.
Yep, something about Ken.
Oh man. Um, you've also taken this love for like breaking down and like just analyzing the game, and that's made you, you know, quite the commentator in events. I've had the pleasure of working with you at different events, locally, internationally. We were at Capcom Cup. What's that been like for you to be able to not only make the content and help the community, but also now verbally explain the game to people who may or may not understand what's going on? What's that like?
Yeah, that part's really cool too because like I said, it plays into the fact that I like to travel and meet people and being able to um share my passion of fighting games with the masses, as you would say, is something I it didn't even hit me until later on. I'm like, wow, like there could have been thousands of people watching that, and new players that probably people who are just getting into starting their journey with fighting games, and as long as I'm able to clearly explain what's going on the screen, it might get someone more enticed, like, oh, this is not just button mashing. There's actually like some thought going on here, um, and and being able to show like that the scientific side of things while also keeping it exciting. It's good to have like a partner doing commentary with me who's like kind of the hype man, and then I'll kind of like break it down on the other end of things. And so that's always cool, kind of having that dynamic. But yeah, just being able to share with like new people, something that I want to see grow and continue to expand like forever. Like, I don't want fighting games to go away. I want them to be well beyond my time. So being
Right.
able to be a part of that is actually something really special.
Who are some of the color commentaries you'd like to work with that help, like to bring the color to your um, analysis, so to speak?
Man, the commentator who I'll have this on record, who I want to do commentary with the most, I would say, is Majin Obama. He's out in Japan now, but he's just so funny, and
Mm.
he just brings really good energy. I'm all about energy. I like having good energy around me. He's hilarious and knowledgeable, and he just keeps it real. Like, he's like he's similar to Yipes, even though he doesn't make the same types of jokes that Yipes makes, but just the
Mm.
authenticity that comes from the way that he talks and communicates about the games that he commentates. I think that's really cool. So he's definitely at the top of my list in terms of commentary, and and I'd like to do commentary also with some of the guys from Europe, like Jammers,
Okay.
F Word. Those guys are really good. I've done commentary with Logan. That was cool. But
Yes.
I'd like to do
How was
commentary with
that? Yeah,
some of the
because I
other.
was at yeah, we was at
That was in the
Game
Dominican
Over.
Republic.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
game over.
So how was that?
Yep.
I was at working with Logan. He's a cool guy. He's very quiet,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
laid back. But he's cool. Cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool. He's obviously more experienced than me in that, but he was able to kind of like feed me certain parts of the commentary, and then like kind of let me like it. At no point did I ever feel like he was kind of like dominating the commentary, even though he was more experienced. It was cool that we were able to kind of like both share the mic, and he let me express myself and my knowledge of the game and my interpretation of what was happening. And then he, using his experience, he was able to kind of like pick me up whenever I would maybe not mess up, but like maybe fill in the gaps of wherever I made have frozen or something. So he was like, it was pretty cool doing it with him, knowing that if I ever messed up, he would kind of pick up the slack.
And that's good. You need to have someone that can definitely help carry the show. Actually, when that you guys are
Yeah.
when you put a show together, with
Yep.
with your words and your expertise. So that's always good to have someone that can always pick up the slack in case somebody falters in that regard.
Yep.
What has been your favorite tournaments in like either tournament series or like one particular tournament in year that are like some of your favorite and most memorable?
In recent years, I would have to say, um, East Coast Throwdown has really taken it to another level, because they started off like, really cool, and then they had like a rough like 2 or 3 years that they were kind of like trying new venues in New Jersey, and they
Mm.
had a couple hiccups there, but then they got like a new team helping them out now. Shout outs to Walter. And Zach, and obviously still Long Island Joe and John and those guys, and they've really stepped up their just the overall production of that tournament has gone like tenfold. Like it's just incredible how that tournament has grown. Um, so yeah, that's one of my favorite tournament series. Of course, Combo Breaker. Um, the the tournament that I think was nearest and dearest to my heart, and the type of event that I really liked was Seasons Beatings. That
Okay.
one was just really cool because it was like everybody from the entire country kind of gathered there. Um, and it was like a very kind of intimate feel. Like it reminded me of the old days of the arcade days. So that tournament's not around anymore, but that was one of
Right.
my favorite tournaments back in the days.
Listen, a lot of hype moments, especially underrated hype moments, happened at season beatings. Uh, I think that was one of the rare and few Daigo defeats happened at season beatings.
Yep.
It's not your typical venue in terms of like fighting game tournament major settings. So I don't know if that between East Coast jet lag and it was just not his weekend that he had to hold L, and and things like that make you know tournaments like that legendary. I wish I was able to go to season beings when it was around. I was able to catch streams, but I never, the time I wanted to go was the time they had the last year, which was unfortunate. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of great events out there, great events that I've yet to have go because either time or just either my personal time or bad timing. It just wasn't able to go. But yeah, man, it's like tons of great tournaments over the years that have come and gone. Some that are still around, some that almost left, but they're still here. Hopefully, after COVID, you know, whatever that new society becomes, because people say, "Oh, I want to go back to the old." Like there's kind of no old. You got to kind of push forward.
Yeah,
We're
yeah, it's
living.
going to definitely be
We're,
different going forward.
mhm.
Yeah,
But
I agree with you. It's not, things are gonna get better. I don't think that
mhm,
it'll be the normal that we knew.
right.
But a lot of things will be a little bit different, and we just have to adapt. And I'm looking forward to when we're able to gather together again, and me able to do some commentary again, and just kind of keep pushing the scene forward. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that, because that's one of my favorite things about being part of the community is going to these events offline and playing with people face to face, and just feeling that energy and meeting people that you mostly interact with probably online, and just being able to kick it with them and play together and all that. It's just really something out of this world. So definitely looking forward to when those days are back.
Yes, most definitely. Have you ever had a player come up to you and thank you for your information? Like, say, yo, you've really helped me, or like, I mean, how far has that gotten for you? Have you ever had someone just come and say, man, you really helped me out there with your tech and your knowledge? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
really helped.
it has actually. When at Combo Breaker, a couple of people that was one of the bigger tournaments of recently, and
Mhm.
that a couple of people recognized me and like just gave me props, like, "Hey, man, I love what you're doing. Keep doing it." And just people, definitely showing love, and like that motivates me to keep going, and just kind of keep doing my thing with that.
Does it like does it feel rewarding for you like when you do this? I mean, I'm sure like anything, there's a level of motivation that needs to happen, right? I'm sure there are days where you don't feel like running to the lab and like breaking down a character, but like, are these things? Do these things motivate you to continue doing what you're doing? Is there other
Yeah,
factors that motivate you as well?
yeah, for sure. Like one of the things that's like really cool is like if I'll say recently, like I posted this really cool discovery that I made for Guile. And as we know, the top guy on the world is Daigo. He's like the Michael Jordan of
Mm.
games. And I was actually watching him on his stream practicing something that I created, and I was like, that blew my mind. Like, and Daigo and I have met countless times, and he knows who I am and stuff, and like, um, but he kind of like has his own way of practicing and doing his own thing and leveling up, and just the fact that he was practicing something that I found was like pretty cool. Like it brought out like the freaking fanboy in me. Like I could have met him 100 times, and that was still really cool to see. I was like, damn, he's actually messing with something that I found. I'm like, that's really dope. That was a good feeling. So yeah, little moments like that, or like seeing somebody win, like with something that I may have found, and then like hearing James Chan in the commentary, like, oh yeah, that was a Javits combo or something like that. Like that always,
Mm.
puts a smile on my face. Because I like to see the game get elevated and people doing cool stuff, and like um, and being able to be a part of that process is something really special.
If COVID wasn't a situation that we will have to deal with right now, how do you think your last year would have gone, would have worked out in terms of the FTC? Were there any plans that you had that because of COVID you couldn't do FTC wise, or like events you wanted to go to? Like, what do you think your last year would have looked like the last year or so?
Yeah, I definitely would have tried to go back to Japan, um, just to kind of see what's going on in that scene. I really liked that country with the time that I went there for about 2 weeks, and just kind of explore more of like meet some of their players and kind of kick it with them and show them learn a little bit about how they do what they do and why they're so good, and kind of see and show them like what I do, and kind of just like knowledge share and just kick it. That would have been something that I would have really loved to do, just travel in general, but in particular Japan, um, just because that's like it's kind of like if you're a fighting game player, Japan is like one of the places that you definitely have to go because that's like one of
Destination,
the
yes.
strongest. Yeah, one of the strongest regions, and they have like all these cool arcades and stuff. So like, if you're into like the arcade side of things, it's really like special to go to like where the games were literally created. Like it's something amazing, you know. So
I want to go back a little bit when you talked about how like the West Coast contingent came over and defeated the East Coast guys over in Virginia, that event. Um,
yep,
when I talked to some people over the years, and especially back then, they wondered at the time like why was the West Coast so good and stuff. From someone who lived in the arcade, I know one aspect that I could explain to them was, unlike the East Coast, where kind of the arcade scene started to die first, and then it kind of just slowly swept over the country. I also said that on on the West Coast in California, you're closer to Japan, and therefore you have Japanese travelers that travel to and from. You're more likely to find Japanese people traveling to California than say in New York, which is a lot more hours on the flight, jet lag, et cetera, et cetera. So I also said that there was a speedier exchange of information between those coaches because of that short connection. Is that something you agree
Yeah.
with? Like that's a conversation that I've had with people over the years.
Yeah, I think from at least from my personal experience with the beginning days of Street Fighter 4, I wouldn't say it was so much an influence of Japan being closer to California because I don't recall any Japanese players going to play in California. Maybe there were, but I just don't remember at the time. Um, but what I do remember is that back then, um, some of the figureheads of the West Coast FGC, like Alex Valle and Combo Fiend and all that, they really it was like pretty important to them to make sure that they were playing hard, like to make sure that whoever was under them, like they were beating them into shape, basically, like and making sure that they were all leveling up together. Um, I felt that more from their scene more than our scene in the beginning. We improved over time in that department, but in the beginning days of Street Fighter 4, like we kind of had like little silos. Like there was like a crew that played at Arturo's house, and a couple of players from there, and then there was like a crew that played with Justin, and a couple of players there, and then there was like another crew that played with like Long Island Joe and those guys. But there was like not too much unity. So like you had like these little pockets of like a little crew of players that knew how to fight Sagat, and then a new little crew of players that knew how to fight Dalsim, and then another crew of players that knew how to fight Rufus. But then if you were like to all fight each other, like nobody really knew that much because there was that those little pockets, bubbles of information where they weren't being shared. Whereas in California's scene, they were all kind of like not I wouldn't want to say buddy buddy with each other, but they were like throwing it down. Like they were making sure that everybody knew. Like if I whipped his ass, I want to make sure I whip everybody's ass so that everybody learns. Like that, it was kind of like that. They had a very different mentality that just was more conducive to improvement for their overall scene. Um, and I'm happy to say that overall that did improve in the East Coast in that time because when the culmination of that was the first big East versus West battle was organized by Gutex. It was bar fights, and I think it was like it was either 5v5. I want to say 5v5, and I think everyone of the East Coast won their matches except for Long Island Joe losing to Alex Valle, and it was like by pixels. Like it was like by like so little bit, but like everybody else won their match. Like Justin won his match. Like everybody that represented the East Coast won all their matches. So it was like we completely turned it around from how it started, and that just proved that like when a scene plays together and has that goal of leveling up together, that the results show, and that was like the big takeaway from that time. And I miss those days because now that everything's online, it kind of feels a little bit like the stronger players are the ones that grind a lot individually, but they aren't like uh you don't have those like those pockets that are all coming together and playing together. Like you don't really see that too much these days. Like a little crew of players that make sure that they all get strong. But it's hard to say why. Maybe the motivation is not as strong because of the no offline events at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a factor. I also believe like again, yeah, just the fact that it's COVID, it's been a blanket of like depression. I feel I don't, and there's not many people I feel they could say they're really really happy in this state that we're in right now, and for the right reasons, of course. It's
Yeah.
taking a toll on all of us in some way or form. Um,
Yep.
as I mentioned, as I had this conversation with other guests previously, I've been personally fortunate not to know anyone personally that has succumbed to COVID, but I definitely know people who have lost a loved one, for sure. So it's one of those things where like if you didn't, if you survived it, then you may have known someone who didn't survive, or you may have been one person separated. That's the kind of reach this virus has had on our world. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's it's not a fun. It reminds me a lot of, I don't know if you ever watch, if you're a fan of The Walking Dead, right? And like the first thing, obvious, the first and most important thing about The Walking Dead is that the world is all full of zombies, right? Everybody's a zombie, right? But as you watch the show and you progress, it's really a minor issue, right? Like we already know, yes, there's like zombies that we have to be careful of and stuff like that. But as you watch the show, it's like you realize that because of the situation, how much society has changed, you know, and how people used to be more caring and loving to each other, and now it's like is a dog eat dog kind of world because we're all trying to survive because of something else
Yep.
that's killing us, And I used to
Yeah.
think that that's the next step, right? Like COVID's going to get so bad that we're going to just turn on each other because it's so and thank God it's like not getting to that point, and hopefully it never will, you know. But yeah, it's just a blanket, another blanket to kind of put through, that, and yeah, it'll change your daily life. I'm sure people who are probably very prominent in the community don't have the time right now because of these COVID related situations and stuff. And like, all
Yep.
we could ever do is wish the best for them and hope that this is all over and we can return to
Yeah.
pressing buttons and showing each other and stuff like that.
You just got to write it out, man. We'll get through it.
We'll definitely get through it. You're definitely an NLBC guy, next level basket, for those who don't know that.
Yep.
And you've been there for years. So, like you said, like the mentality has changed in the East Coast, in terms of like not sharing tech, as they say. I don't want to uh, drop names of when I talk about when I cite people who have the possibly controversial uh, thoughts or words, but one player in particular, I'm sure you know who this is, cited that we keep tech from each other, we're not sharing tech, and that's why we lose to people out of our region, uh, people out of our country, etc. Um, that all being said, and you being a guy at next level in the trenches, you've been there. Um, where do you honestly rank the New York region and scene in regards to the rest of the world, and why?
So the New York region has, let's see, has a lot of strong players still, new and old. Um, like you have your Smug, you have Shine, you have Item, you still have Arturo.
Mm.
So you still definitely have like a strong pool of talent from this region, new and old. Um, but yeah, I don't know if those guys play amongst each other that much. Um, which I guess is unfortunate. I know they all play a lot online in general, so they're all practicing. I'm sure they run into each other.
Right.
But there isn't
Do you
like
think
right
there's
now.
still like there's still not enough cohesiveness? Like it's been better, but not enough still to where we need to be. Is that probably where you're going with this?
Yeah, yes, I think it could be a lot better, but I wouldn't limit it now. I think right now, and this might be a controversial thing to say, I think right now it's probably at a low point in terms of people playing with each other with the express goal of leveling each other up. Like I think
Okay.
there's a lot of like kind of individualism right now,
Mm-hmm.
where people are like either playing for a prize or for sponsors or something like, or for content, for something that's gonna bring themselves
Cloud.
up. But
Mm.
yeah, or clout, whatever it may be. I won't knock it for clout. Whatever, whatever
Right.
people's goals
Whatever
are,
it is,
that's
yeah.
fine. Yeah, whatever it is.
Which is totally fine.
But it's more, it's on an individual level rather. So, but I attributed that more right now to the fact that there's no offline events, because when there's offline events, there's more of a sense of camaraderie. But right now,
Mm-hmm.
since everything's online and everybody's in their own home and they don't have like their guy, their buddies with them together, it's about like getting those individual wins and try to get ahead on their own.
Right.
So,
So
um,
it's probably right now just survival, right? I think because we technically still sort of quarantined, or our society diminished a bit. We're kind of on our own islands, just basically fighting off intruders, right? 'Cause we're trying to survive, and we're trying to survive, I guess, in our gaming careers, right? Because we can't
yeah,
on technically we're not supposed to all meet up, right? It's not like, yeah, you're my FTC family, but like, with COVID and all, I shouldn't really be around you, 24/7. I don't know what you do in your life outside of fighting games. Maybe not. It's so many variables to this, right?
Yeah,
And
there's a lot that goes into it. So yeah, I'm not putting this on any individual players or anything like that. I just
of
think
course
the
not. Yeah,
circumstance of what we're the situation that we're in right now is lending itself to a situation in which players, maybe it's not in their best interest to, play to help out their fellow players. They're kind of all just kind of trying to level up and get as strong as they can individually. So it's I'd like to see that change somehow. Um maybe create some more team events or something, or maybe somebody will organize like virtual sessions where people will play each other explicitly with the goal of learning, I don't know, some certain matchups. But I do know for a fact that that's not happening right now. Um, like, I'll give examples. I'm not saying this is exactly happening, but let's say people uh, struggle against a particular character like Dalsim. I know Arturo is not playing people with his Dalsim to help them get better in the Dalsim matchup. It's just
right.
that's not happening. So it's like
I
there are
get that.
people
Yeah.
that there'll be like that level of like either, and it's a bad thing in the end, because then there'll be like overall as a community people will be like frustrated fighting a character like that, and then it'll be bad for himself because he's people are not forcing him to adapt and find new strategies because he's just staying at like a base level that is working to a certain degree. And then if he loses, the few times that he does, uh, there's not that much room for like figuring out like, oh, I need to change this or that, and
Right.
that's kind of the cool thing about like people teaching each other how to beat each other, because you end up just being better overall.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Street Fighter V has had a lot of changes from the initial release. What has been your opinion of the game from the start, and then now, what with the addition of the V shift and like these new mechanics? Where do you think the game stands? I've heard a lot of mixed opinions about the new system. Uh, It's starting for me. It seems like the needle's shifting towards negativity right now as people are playing more and more. But as of this moment, what's your thoughts on the overall progression of the game from its initial release and then now with its current iteration and the new system?
I think the game, the core nature of the game hasn't changed that much, in the sense that um, Capcom themselves, when they initially released a Street Fighter Five, and they were making a lot of comparisons to the game systems of how it was compared to Street Fighter 4. So, for example, in Street Fighter 4, you had invincible backdashes, you had focus attacks, a lot of the mechanics that you could FADC your uppercuts. That's like where you cancel the startup of your uppercut to make it safe, and you could dash forward or backwards. So it was like there was a lot of systems that were very low commitment and potentially high reward. And Street Fighter Five did away with that. They made everything like any decision that you made had to be like a true commitment. Like if you were wrong, you were gonna pay for it. So, and that applies to everything. Like backdashes are crush counterable. You can't cancel your uppercuts except for a few of them that you can cancel into V trigger, but even that's not safe. Um, uh, if your uppercut gets blocked, you're in a crush counter state. So like everything, they want to make sure that like you're either right or you're wrong, and that's it. Like there's no gray area. Like you better be committing and making good choices, and or avoiding those situations altogether. But it's very heavy on commitment, and it's a very also offensive game, in the sense that like the defensive options are generally pretty weak compared to how strong the offensive options are. Um, and like uh and I don't know if that aspect of the game was the original vision that they may have had, because when V triggers were first created, they were marketed as, oh, these aren't huge comebacks like the ultras were, because ultras were like one big super that took all your life. These are just
Mm.
like, small power ups that will help you make a comeback. But as the game has developed, um, most of the V triggers, the fact that you're powered up for such an extended period of time, it ended up being arguably more powerful than having one shot to get like a big chunk of health. Whereas you
Right.
might mess that up, but if you're powered up for 40 seconds, you have a lot of chances to get damage. Um, and and then that combined with the fact that they removed chip kills, just makes it so that you're powered up and you're not able to be chipped unless they use a super, which they won't always have. So
Right.
there's a lot more comebacks, just because of the overall system of the game, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But as the game has developed and the types of changes that they made, um, they've maintained the game staying about commitment and making sure that whatever you decide, you're either rewarded or you're punished hard for it. But they have mitigated some of those risks with the addition of stuff like V shift now. And I remember when V reversals first came out, they didn't used to return some of your stun meters, so like they strengthened that a little bit. Uh, just like little system changes here and there that just kind of helped, with the defensive options. Oh, they've nerfed the scaling on crush counters. Now they made it. They added scaling to throws. They stun you, so they're doing. They've increased life bars for most characters in the cast, just so you have like maybe one or two more chances to survive in the round. So they definitely understand that when the game is so heavily offensive based, it can feel quite stressful. It can feel like you can't hold on to a lead even if you're doing well. Um,
Right.
so they're trying to like mitigate that to a degree, and I think they're doing a good job little by little. For some people, they're not doing a good enough job, but I think if you have to give credit, they are the trend of the changes that they have made for the most part have been to reduce the like that volatility of like 1 second you're winning and then another second you're losing. So they try to like balance that out a little bit, um, while still maintaining that like high pressure feeling of the game. So I think they're doing a good job.
Do you think this
And
is in its iteration was something that they could have figured out a long time, or they had to go through the process to get here?
um, that's hard to say, because I don't know, what their vision for the game was. We as the players
Right.
have our one experience that we think how it should be or how we want it to be. But ultimately, the developers have their own vision of what they want the game to be, and they don't necessarily have to listen to what
No,
the
they don't.
players are saying. Yeah, they really
They
don't. They
definitely don't.
just that's just something that's a tough pill to swallow for some people. But if a developer has a certain vision for their game, that's just what we have to adapt to. And
Mhm.
so there's always that dynamic of it as well. There's a lot of sense of entitlement when people request certain changes and things like that. They're like, oh, why isn't my character like this? Or why isn't this system like this? And like, instead of having that mindset, it's like, you got to think of it this way. Like, okay, this is how it is. How am I going to adapt to it? So,
Right.
um,
How are
so
you going
yeah,
to work with it? How you're going to,
right,
use
right.
as intended, as they say.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. So,
who are do you think the tiers in the game right now, in your opinion? Because I feel tiers are an opinionated subject. There's nothing set in stone. Um, but in your opinion, do you think the new top players or the new top tier characters have changed a lot? Has it, if they have changed, where has it changed, on the top end, the middle end? What are your thoughts on the
I
characters
think,
right now?
I think in this, um, I think this latest patch did overall a good job of bringing down the top closer to the middle and bringing the bottom up closer to the top.
Okay,
um, but then
is
there's
Alex good
always,
now? Because
I think so. I think he's good enough. I'm not saying he's like super strong, but I think he definitely has all the tools necessary for a grappler archetype character to get the job done.
Okay,
Um,
all right.
whereas before he had a lot of issues that prevented him from doing that. He had to take like really wild risks, and then didn't have a way to like for example, Alex was the type of character that he would risk something big, and if he was right on that guess, he didn't have a chance to keep it going. So he didn't have
Hmm,
like that kind of like that momentum steamrolling
right.
type that grapplers are known for. He kind of had to like continuously guess right over and over and over, and that the odds are against you when you play a character like that
He had no real
that
Oki,
can't.
you're saying.
Yeah, no real exactly, no real Oki. But he can't really stay in after he makes that one big risk.
Oki
But
is
they kind of
short
changed.
for Okizemi. Sorry for people who don't know what that means.
Yeah,
Okizemi. A
yeah.
term used.
Okizemi is the knockdown game, like how well your character can continue the pressure after they knock the opponent down. So
Right.
yeah, he had very poor Okizemi options, but now they address that like a lot. Like he has a lot
Mm,
of pretty good Okizemi options, and when he does get in, he does a lot more damage now. So they definitely address some of his problems. Um, I do feel that while they were rebalancing and bringing down the top and bringing up the bottom, in the process, some of the guys that were already pretty good in the middle now are kind of like bubbling up to the top. Like you
okay.
have like your Ryus, your Codys, those characters like that they were kind of like right on the cusp of being like strong characters. Maybe they needed like one or two more changes, and they gave them
Mm,
like maybe a little bit more changes than they probably might have needed. It's still early to call that, but
right.
that's what it's looking like right now. So yeah, to answer your question, I do think in this season compared to maybe the last two, there's much more of a noticeable shuffle in who the strong characters are.
Okay.
So there's going to be a lot of people experimenting a lot early on with a lot of different characters. Like I feel like last season, it was pretty much the same characters dominating, like your Akuma, Rashid, Urian, and then they just like kind of threw in Seth into the mix, and then like
Mm,
he became like the next dominant character. But like the core, you know, your core offenders were still all there, like they were, but this time around, it kind of changed. It's not really certain who the really strongest characters are.
okay. I mean, it is fairly new, fairly change. We got to give it time. Maybe in
Yep.
2 or 3 months, we could revisit that and
Yep.
get your opinion then on who's the strongest. Um, who are some of your favorite competitors in Street Fighter Five? Or is she not just Street Fighter Five in Street Fighter over the years? Like, who have been some of your favorite competitors?
Over the years, I'll give a shout out lately, as of late, one of the players that I've been really impressed with his just work ethic and attitude towards improvement is Zaffarino from Massachusetts.
Okay, yeah,
He's a Sagat player, and he has played a couple of different characters over the years. He used to play Fei Long in Street Fighter
Fei
4,
Long.
and yeah, and I got to give him a lot of credit because he he's the type of player that he doesn't necessarily always win, but even when he loses, if you want to root for him because he clearly like he takes notes on why he lost. He verbalizes it. He talks about it. He talks about a game plan of what he's going to do to improve. He peppers in a little bit of philosophy of just like overall mindset and positivity. Um, and he was also when before COVID, he was literally driving down every week to NLBC at one point from Massachusetts, and then like
That's
spending
three
the
and a half
night.
hours.
Yeah, that's quite a trip to do that every
Yeah,
week. That's
yeah,
dedication. And recently, I would say in the last 3 months, I think he won like two NLBCs, and there was NLBC. Even though it's online, it is still a very stacked tournament. You have Capcom
still
Cup
stacked. Yes,
champions, and you have Punk, who's like the strongest player in the world right now. You have Idom always there. You have Arturo. You got a mix of old players, new players, really strong players. And to be able to do it with, with the character that he uses also, which is like not a weak character, but not really playing the same game as everybody else. He uses Sagat. Really impressive, and it just goes to show that his work ethic, is what's really leading to his success. And I'm always rooting for that guy, and I really want to see him, continuously succeed, especially when offline events come back. Besides him, I gotta say, Idom is always impressive. He's very calm and collected. Just the way his approach to the game, very impressive. Shout out to Arturo, still playing. He's like 55 years old, still playing. Just kidding, but yeah, he's pretty old. But he's still a strong competitor. And yeah, there's anybody who gets out there and competes consistently gets my respect. So that's I'm happy to still see it going on.
Awesome. Do you have like I can assume and say that you're a fighting game fan, right? You're a fan of fighting games, right?
Yep.
Do you have a fighting game you really like that people don't really know you for, or know that you even like this game? Is there a game out there like your secret crush? That's
I
not
really
Street Fighter?
like Guilty Gear and Tekken. Those are like the games that I wish I was better at. Particularly, I would say Guilty Gear. There's a lot of like really cool and interesting mechanics in that game that I wish I could just kind of like play with those guys and really level up, because it's a really cool scene and really cool characters, and it's a franchise that deserves a lot more attention than it gets, in my opinion.
Definitely,
and because
agreed.
yeah, it's a super really good game. So that's and then I'm happy that GG's Guilty Gear Strive, has been getting praise for the good net code, and when it was initially shown a few months back, it was kind of getting some negative press because the UI was weird, and it was like they were changing a lot of things about traditional Guilty Gear and all that. But I think in the latest beta, people were really happy with the direction that it's going. Not You can't please anybody, but they saw so much improvement from just a few months
Right.
that direction shows that like when the final game comes out and potentially in future updates, it's gonna Guilty Gear is gonna be all right. So, yeah, Guilty Gear and Tekken. I used to play Tekken back in the day. Last Tekken I played seriously was Tekken 5 DR.
Okay.
But yeah, I kind of wish I was back in those two if I wasn't playing Street Fighter.
I never for the life of me understood why whenever a game gets announced or released, and then there's like the alpha footage or the beta footage shown, right? That people hang their hats on what they see and just kind of give up, right, or have complaints. And I'm like, especially if you've been around the community for a while, I've definitely learned a long time ago that like give it the game still needs to be polished, right? They would just want to show you something, like because how weird would it be if like tomorrow Capcom showed everybody Street Fighter 6 and it was done, like it was done,
Yeah.
completed. There's like 30 people in this startup, and people are like, whoa, like, so you have to like do the whole informing that, hey, we're doing this. Hey, look at what it looks right now, right?
Yeah.
My favorite comparison to this is the King of Fighters 13, right? Like, I love fighting games, but we're basically known for King of Fighters. Like, Steven and I, who co-founded KPB, like we grew up on KOF. And while we love
Right.
fighting into the home, I put everything under the sun. I love the Alpha series growing up. Like, there's always a spot in my heart for KOF, right? And I remember when 14 was being released, and they came out with the first like trailer. This has happened a lot in fighting games, right? The game graphically is like, okay, wasn't the best looking, right? But I mean, like, honestly, from one fighting game player to another, are we really focused on the graphics when we're in the mix of a fighting game, right? Am I worried about, the pixels on this character when I'm trying to, stop it, stop getting mixed up, during a fight,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I kind of find it weird. And then again, it's a beta, right? Or it's a preliminary footage, and like people they're so ready to go. Oh, this thing sucks. I remember. I don't know if you paid attention to Marvel Infinite when it came out, and like
Yeah,
the complaints about the faces and stuff, Chungi's face, and it's like you
yeah,
guys aren't even seeing how the game works. So I never understood why people are so quick to hang their hats up on those kind of things and not give the developers a chance. Because like I said, they don't want to be
yeah.
surprised with a game tomorrow with no marketing. And no information and just be like, what? How does that?
Yeah. I
I
think
always
yeah, I think part of that is because there's certainly a disconnect with the end user of the people who are playing the games and the developers, in the sense that the end users don't really know what it is that goes into making a game, and
Mhm.
the just the overall process of, like as you mentioned, like having to show something initially of what the game, like a prototype basically, of like, this is what the game will is starting to shape out to be, but this is not the final product.
Right,
It's like they don't read the fine print. They just see like, oh, this is what it looks like now. It looks like crap. Ah, rah,
right,
and it's unfortunate that is that way. I don't see that ever changing unless there was like some kind of developer that made like literally like a full blown video of like, this is what the development process is like. This is what it changes. Like, this is why we're early. Like, they would literally have to like kind of hold their hand through the process, and
right,
and at the end of the day, developers, they'd rather take the heat than let people look under the hood. You know what I mean?
right.
So
Of course.
they're ready to roll with
And
the
then
punches.
for business reasons, you don't do that, right? You don't
Yeah,
give away all your signatures, right? You're in a business, right? Yeah, I don't want to tell everyone how we made the design or how we, that's not information that should be available to the public, of course.
right.
Tools,
So
tricks of the trade. You kind of keep that within in house, so to speak.
yeah. So yeah, maybe if the developers figured out some type of way to explain a little bit about the development process, I think that could help that situation a little bit, because it's still gonna
Mhm.
they're always gonna get hate, But but yeah, it could probably help a little bit if if the communication is done right.
I seem to have this ability to kind of coax people into the sort of segues I want to go into, like my next questions and stuff. And this is perfect because we're talking about developers. You're a coder. Do you ever see yourself working in video games or fighting game maybe in your life in your future?
Uh, I would love to. Right now, I'm still very much a junior engineer, so I still have a lot to learn. I'm actually going into a company more in the finance sector, but I know that with the skills that I'll develop there over time, there may be some stuff that will be translatable to game design, and with my knowledge already in gaming in general and how things work, I'm sure I'll be able to kind of bridge that gap. But yeah, it's definitely in the cards, but I don't have anything like in the works, I guess you could say.
Right.
But it's definitely
Okay.
something that I would like to aspire to.
But everything starts with a thought. So that's definitely,
Yeah.
the first building block on your way to whatever it is you want to accomplish. Sure.
Yep.
Um, what do you hope to like see happen in like the next year or so in terms of fighting games, whether it involves you personally, you and what you contribute to the community or not?
Um, I think it would be cool if the if being that I make the type of content that I make, I think it would be cool if there was some sort of community sharing, content sharing within a game, like where people can upvote and make like highlight certain posts and things like that. That would be something really cool. Like where literally, like, let's say I make a discovery, and rather than just sharing it on my Twitter, you can literally view it in your video game environment and see it
Nice,
live,
yeah.
and be able to and be able to, like, maybe, let's say, play the recording and then take control of the recording yourself and try it yourself and look at the inputs and things like that, and be able to leave comments and questions and all that kind of stuff, kind of like, being able to add that kind of engagement to sharing, content within the game. I think that would be really cool. And that kind of goes hand in hand with like, just improving online features in general, like beyond the net code. Like, you know, I've never understood why some games from the same developers have had versions of the game where they had online training mode, and then the very next version of the game doesn't have it. And
that
um,
kills me. I'm sorry. Go
well,
ahead.
yeah. So I don't know if it's like a budget issue or something, but I think we're in an age where, especially now, where everybody's stuck inside, where being able to connect and share more information is like really valuable and cool. So I think if you know, I would like to see like more features inside a game that is about like community sharing with each other in some way.
Guys, Capcom,
Yeah.
SNK, are you guys listening to this man? You should hire him.
Yeah.
Like, he has some
Yeah.
ideas, man. As a content creator, man, listen, get this guy on your payroll, man. He'll do wonders for you. Promise you.
Yeah, like another one,
um,
another idea that it will be really cool. See, people right now, there's a ton of YouTube channels that they they share replays of matches of top
mhm,
players that they take from, like, let's say CFN or something.
right,
But there could also be a system like that within the game itself where you could just know who the top player is, and there could be like a comments section or leader, like a board where you can see like, oh, this is the top most viewed match of the
right.
week or something like that, and like everybody could kind of be following the same thing. So that would be really cool too. Um, you know, and like if you could watch a tournament right from your game, you know,
Mm,
in the environment, like not just stream, like you could literally, it's just because at the end of the day it's just inputs, right? Like it's just they're just reading inputs. So let's say if there's a tournament that's being ran online from within the game, the same inputs that the players are doing, they could be like being fed into your game, and you could be see it like direct from the source. That would be
yeah,
really cool
that's
as
awesome.
well. So,
Because they have that. Like,
yeah.
if you look at, I remember, I'm sure they have where you can see like the inputs and the replays of
Yeah.
different matches. I found it interesting. I don't know if you knew, or even a lot of people knew about this. I remember when Street Fighter V was first released. You got the people in the community that they data mine and they go through the game, and
Yep.
they found sound bites for like all of the U.S. majors that were
Yeah.
involved in Capcom Cup. I don't know at any point if they were used in the game actually. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if you knew anything about that, but they did data mine it and they pulled it from the game, and it was like you had the announcers say like final round and SoCal regionals at the time, and so I
Yeah.
guess these were all destinations for the Pro Tour. Uh,
Yeah.
they didn't pop up in actual going through the game at any point, did they? Or
No,
do you know that?
I don't think they were used. I think, but I I can't I really can't speak to that, but I would imagine that maybe they had an idea of how it was going to be
Yeah.
implemented, and maybe for legal reasons or maybe for like some kind of budgetary constraint, they weren't able to pull it off the way that they originally envisioned, so they kind of just scrapped it. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, I wanted to touch back on one of your ideas, and this is a personal thing I wanted to state. That for me, I kind of, as a person who does content creation in terms of broadcasting, tournaments and stuff like that. Um, I guess in a weird way, it sounds kind of contradictory in a sense, but I kind of had an issue with guys that just literally sit at home and grab a replay and kind of, I don't know if they monetize it or they can or they do. And while it's sort of a great resource that someone's out there compiling it from a content creator standpoint that has to put more into what they do, I always felt like that's kind of lazy and like the work's kind of already done. So I get kind of
Yeah.
torn between the two, and I've definitely had like some of these content creators like approach us um, as streamers and would ask for our content because of course if one thing that you streamers have to do, especially and when you first started streaming, and like when streaming really started to blow up in events in like the early 2010s and stuff like that, is that we had to protect the content we were recording, because the second we were streaming it, someone had it on YouTube monetizing it,
Yeah.
and we're the ones that record it. We're the ones that haul our equipment and have to deal with the public and deal with TOs and annoying
Yep.
players, and for someone to come in their underwear and just say, "Hey, I'm going to take what you just did all weekend and monetize it." And then I used to actually get like hate mail from getting certain people in their channels closed down, because I have to sometimes sit down after an event the next day, and before I could even upload what we actually did, find out if someone already beat us to it, and
Right.
then it would just be like literally for hours, strike, strike, strike this person, and I had to fill the whole forum to YouTube, and so I would get like these nasty emails like, "Oh, you can't do that to me. You don't own the content," and blah blah blah, and it would just be like a fight, like with people. I mean, it's not a
Yeah.
fight.
Yeah.
I didn't respond to the email. It's like, whatever, dude, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that do you ever have people that kind of just like take your content and like not give you credit and stuff, or go to the next step, monetize it, try to make something of it? Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, it hasn't been really much of an issue for me because I post such short clips that I don't think there's
Mhm.
anything that people are doing with that stuff. It's just kind of like, here's this one-off thing that you can try on your own or not, and
Right.
just it doesn't really go beyond that. I don't have like any kind of real production going into my stuff, so that hasn't become an issue. But there was one time where uh, there was someone literally just like reposting everything that I was posting like a day later. Like he would like download it
Mhm.
from Twitter somehow and then repost it on his account. And um and then I asked him, I literally like linked him my video on his, and I said like, hey, why are you like literally just like ripping my stuff and not at least tagging me?
Mhm.
And he was like, "Oh, I didn't think it was a problem." And I was like, "No, I'm not saying it's a major problem, but like, have some courtesy and like say like, hey,
Right.
man, can I post this?" Or like,
Yeah. Oh, hey,
so
this is from Javits. Like, don't act like it was
yeah,
yours.
yeah. And I- look, right now, I think maybe that's something that I should really be looking into more of, protecting my content in some way. Just because it does feel, to your point, like the Wild West sometimes. Like, I'm not trying to throw shade at this particular website, but for example, um, event hubs. A lot of
Mm.
times I post something and no one will reach out to me from their organization, and they just make an article about something that I post, like, oh,
Right.
Twitter user Javits finds unblockable or something like that. I'm like,
Mm.
all right, that's cool, but like, what if I didn't want an article written about this? Like, why? No one
Right.
reached out to me, so it's kind of like a little bit strange sometimes that they feel like they could just post whatever. It hasn't been an
Right.
issue, but to your point, I think it's something that anybody who's making content should be at least mindful of.
Right.
That as you grow and you scale, sometimes things that you may be working for, someone may try to benefit off without doing necessarily the work that you did. And that's kind of like a whole ethics discussion that we can get into. But
For another
yeah,
time, for sure, definitely.
I feel like I'm not there yet, basically. But maybe I will be.
That's good. That's good. I do want to thank you for your time today. Definitely like this hearing like your side. We don't get to. I don't think guys in your area get talked about a lot, and how important you are to the community, being able to provide analysis and tech, as they say, so that players can actually go out there and improve. So I thank you for that. Is there anything you want to say to people who are aspiring content creators, who or how to like really like sit down and really evaluate the game for yourself and find your own tech, like to be your own like lab rat, so to speak?
Yeah, I think to start, I think I'll say what worked for me, and you can probably apply some of that to yourself. Let's say if you're somebody who enjoys watching tournaments, and you see a situation that somebody did something really cool, or somebody made like they drop, like, let's say they dropped a big punish that they could have won the round with, and then like they lost it, like the player lost because they didn't know what to do. Like, always use that opportunity to, like, you know, power up your game and go into training mode and see, like, what would you have done in that situation? What could you have done in that situation? Because you never know if you will be the one, or somebody you know will be the one in that situation in the future. And being able to always have that mindset of looking for the answers, I think, is how tech is created. Like, just that continuous thirst for knowledge. um and that mentality applies and seeps into everything in life, I think. um not just accepting, like, oh, that happened and that's it, there's nothing beyond it. It's like, okay, that happened, but how could it have been different? What could have happened? What should have happened? Like, the more you start to ask these questions, it kind of puts you in the direction of, like, how are you going to find the answers. So
Interesting.
that's my to people. Recreate the situations that you see that are cool or interesting, or just kind of get in there and try them out for yourself, and you might learn a thing or two.
That's very thoughtful insight. I definitely appreciate you for that. Last thing before we go, any shout outs, people you want to mention, people you want to say what's up to?
Yeah, I want to give a shout outs to just the whole New York scene. Love you guys. Hope everybody will be back to playing. I want to give a shout out to Henry Sen. Um, I know we haven't been able to go to next level because everything is closed, but I promise you that we will be back there and supporting you and keeping you and the scene alive the way that you kept us and our scene alive. So I think big shout outs to Henry Sen. Um, be sure to support him and next level once this pandemic is under control. And yeah, it'll be something that if you love fighting games, and we gotta have a place to gather and play and have events locally, and we all gotta support each other. So yeah, he's like the owner of Next Level. So whatever opportunity or way that you can support him and his team and his crew, and that applies to everybody, like everybody involved in that, helping keeping this thing alive. You yourself, Team Spooky, Arturo, all these guys that are like working behind the scenes to kind of give us cool content and events and all that. Support them. Support East Coast Throwdown. Support Defend the North. Support. Like, that's the only way that we're going to continue to grow and level up and keep having fun with these games. So anybody who's doing something, support them. Go for it.
Definitely. If somebody
and Casa Bunch and Bunch.
Casa
Big shout
Bunch,
out to
yeah.
Bunch.
Shouts to Bunch, yo. We love
Yep.
Bunch. Bunch is awesome dude. So if somebody listens to this podcast or watches this video and they want to hit you up and argue with you about tiers and tech, how do they reach you? How do they reach on social media to pick your brain?
Yeah, just hit me up on Twitter. That's at Javits, Jav1ts. So Javits with a 1. I'm always on there posting cool stuff. If you have any questions for me, or if you want to play, throw down some games, just drop me a little note, tag me, and yeah, I'm always down to chit chat. Hit me up.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jav, for coming on the show and giving us so much insight on what you do. For you guys watching, if you don't want to always watch a video and you want to kick back in your car and just relax and have a good time listening, you can check us out on your favorite podcast channel. You can try it over at Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. With that being said, this is KB Rodimus. I want to wish you guys a great day. See you soon. Thank you, Javits, for coming on the show today, and we will see you guys next time. Take care.
Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
No problem. Thank you.